Morris Henshaw here from the Pacifica Historical Society and the host of the show, Footprints of Pacifica. We get together every week to discover and explore the lure and the love of lovely Pacifica, its character and its characters. The focus of today's show is the lives of two Pacificans who grew up in the area at the end of World War II and lived here in the 1950s and 1960s. They were here when the city was incorporated, and throughout those early days they had the enjoyment of living in our community. They raised their families here, and they're still living in Pacifica today. We are honored to have with us today Andy Gaben and Lorraine Reagan here in the studio so we can discuss some of the exciting things that happened in their lives during the early days of Pacifica. Thank you both for being here. You know, I've had the pleasure of talking with these ladies over the last several months. I was doing a research on the sports teams of Pacifica several months ago, and I needed somebody to talk to me about the history. So I contacted these people, and Lorraine came forward with a picture. And I want to show you this because she was a bat girl with the first baseball team in Pacifica called the Coastside Merchants. So Lorraine, why don't you tell me just a little bit about what happened with that and how you got to be a bat girl with this baseball team?
Well, first of all, it was boys, lots of boys, and it was a group of men, young men, and the teenagers, and the baseball diamond was over in which is Fairway Park now. And excuse me, and I don't know exactly how I became Batgirl, but I think I haunted them until they finally gave me the job. And like I said, I'm so sorry. They, like I said, they were young men. Some were fathers, and they all lived in Pacifica, and that's about how I became a Batgirl.
It's interesting that you also told me that was an airstrip years before.
It was. It wasn't it was just for private planes that would come in, but it didn't last very long.
So before we get into talking about early Pacifica, perhaps you can share with us what part of Pacifica you lived in and at what age you came to Pacifica. Andy, perhaps you first.
Sure. I came to Pacifica right after World War II. Lorraine was here many years before that because she was born in the area. But we came here, and my mother loved the ocean, and we found the house in Sharp Park right on the beach, and my mom and dad bought it. My sister, my mom and dad, and I lived there for many years, and I was a freshman at Jefferson High School. I knew nobody. I only knew one person from the area, and that was Jerry Rhodes, and I only knew him because he was our paper boy. But he was very friendly with me and kind of helped me around Jefferson that first day. I met Lorraine 2 years later when she came to Jefferson.
Well, maybe Lorraine, you can tell us about your early life then.
Well, I was born in San Francisco and came to Rockaway Beach when I was about 1, and I still live in Rockaway Beach, and that's 75 years. And my husband, Jack Regan, made the big move from Sharp Park to Rockaway Beach. And like I say, I don't intend to move.
You're here for the duration.
I'm here for the duration, and I live right down the street from the Rockaway Beach School.
We're going to be talking about a hodgepodge of topics over the next few minutes, and I'm going to ask you both to share your memory of some of those activities that you were involved with. But before we go into that, maybe you can just tell the audience how long that you've known each other and what type of activities that you shared growing up in Pacifica.
Well, I loved meeting Lorraine. For some reason, we just clicked. And you know one good thing about it? She had a horse. And I had nothing. I didn't even have a two-wheel bike. And she would come from Rockaway Beach on Corrigan, Wrong Way Corrigan it was named for. And we would ride double all over the coast. We'd go to Rockaway, we'd go to Pedro, we'd go up to Edgemar to see our friends. And it was great. It was wonderful for me. A few years later, I did get a bike, and so did she, and then we biked everywhere.
How about that horse? What happened?
Well, I had to sell it because I was going to a vacation in New York, and my mom said, well, if you want to go, you better sell the horse. So I had to sell the horse. And in those days, my dad built a corral right next to the house. And I'm sure you wouldn't be able to do that today in Pacifica.
We're going to be talking about, as I said, various activities and events here, and both Lorraine and Andy have pictures to share with us. As we go through, they're going to be showing the pictures to the audience. And the first thing I want to talk about to them is about their education, because they went to school as elementary, and then as I understand, you went to Jefferson High School. Terra Nova nor Oceana was built at that time. So maybe you might be able to tell us a little bit about the education system.
Jefferson was the only school from Half Moon Bay to Brisbane. The next school would have been South City. Even San Bruno didn't have a school then. And I think they went on down the road. I did not go to elementary school here in Pacifica. My sister did. She started in the 3rd grade. She was in the class that graduated first from the new Sharp Park school in 1950. I loved my years at Jefferson. It was a small school. It was right after the war, and it hadn't expanded the way it has now. And there was only 102 people in the graduating class in 1950.
Oh my gosh. How about you, Lorraine?
Well, I went to school in Rockaway. And there was one classroom upstairs that had the 1st through 4th grade with Mrs. Wallace, the teacher, and downstairs was the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade with Mrs. Adams. And as you can see, that's the whole school. And when I graduated in '48, we had a very large class of 5.
How many schools were in Pacifica at that time, though?
Well, there was Rockaway and Sharp Park.
Or San Pedro, it was called.
Or San Pedro, I should say. But to get to Jefferson, Mr. McGill was the Spanish teacher who lived in Half Moon Bay. And he drove the bus. He picked up the children from Pedro Point, Rockaway, Valleymar, Edgemar, and he would drive to school, and then he would go to his Spanish class and teach his class, and then after school he'd get on the bus and drive us all home. And the bus was stored at Bernardi's Ranch in the back of Pedro. And then he would drive on home to Half Moon Bay.
Well, that must have caused quite a trouble with transportation at that time, because as we know Highway 1 now, we're very happy with it, but at that time, Highway 1 really didn't exist as it does today. So how was the transportation back there?
Well, we did have one classmate up, and we had to go through the Hog Ranch Road up to the Skyline. Okay. But and then when Westlake was built, we had to go down and pick Westlake children up too. But
how did you experience going back and forth to school?
I loved it. I learned so many songs because we used to sing at the top of our lungs, all kinds of songs, including 99 bottles of beer on the wall, and we'd get to 1.
How did people get around in Pacifica in those early days?
You did
bicycles,
walk, bicycle, and there on Sharp Park they had the big bus.
Yeah,
Nolan's bus.
Frank Nolan's little bus,
and it would be from Sharp Park up to West Portal, and we would take the bus and go to the theater up there. Was the Empire, and
I believe that was the name of it.
The Empire and El Rey on Ocean Avenue.
Oh, cool.
But, and then the Greyhound would only, in the morning you got the Greyhound, I think it was about 7:30, and then it would come, that was one bus, and then coming home it was about 5 o'clock, the bus from 7th Street.
So you get home at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and you want to go out at nighttime. What do we do in the evenings in Pacifica?
You didn't.
Well, now, no, there was one night a week,
Friday,
where the Sharp Park teenagers would have their dance, and it was up in the Quonset hut up in what we call the canyon. It came from the old camp that was put up for Italian.
Explain the canyon for people who do not know what the canyon is.
The canyon is eastern part of Sharp Park.
Back by Oceana.
By Oceana. Oceana's in the canyon, actually. And those homes have been there a long, long time. And the Quonset hut was brought from the camp that they kept Italian and German immigrants in during the war, and the county of San Mateo decided they were going to do something for the youth over here, and they moved that Quonset hut to, I think it's called Pomo Park.
Pomo Park, you're right.
And that belonged just to the teenagers at that time. And we had a great time. We had a once-a-week meeting. We had our dances on Friday night, and we were very democratic. We had representatives on our board from all sections, and I believe Lorraine was the Rockaway Beach rep, and I was secretary. Lou Piccolotti, another longtime friend of all of ours, was the president, and we did a lot of good things. One time we had a dance where we were so proud of ourselves, we raised $300 for cancer. Down in the Valley Mar Pavilion, and it was quite an event. We dressed formally and had a 20-piece band, and it was great.
You know, talk about that. Actually, Andy, it seemed like you were very well aware of what was happening with fundraising and contributions. And at one time, you started a pen pal program for military servicemen. How did that work, and how did you get involved with that?
Well, that was about 1949, 1950 that started. I just graduated from high school. And Maud Piskey owned the Sharp Park Breakers, which was down on Palmetto Avenue. It was in her home, actually. And she had this idea that we could do something for the servicemen. So Helen Plate and I wrote a column. It was weekly, and we corresponded with all 23 of the coastside servicemen, many of which are in the baseball picture, and many of which are in this picture here. And then we would write about their activities that they would tell us about, that they were doing. And there's a picture of me with the breakers, and I'm holding a big jar. And that is the jar that I held going around collecting money from all the stores in town to help pay for the postage.
Talk about postage now. Lorraine, you had a relative that was a postmaster here in Pacifica.
Yes, my grandmother was the postmistress in Rockaway Beach. It was in the general store that they owned, which was the last
Do you have a
name.
picture of that here?
No, I don't have it with me. But my grandmother owned the store, and they had the post office in there. And then my grandfather had a blacksmith shop on Old County Road. And, excuse me, that store later became Louisa's store that was right on Rockaway Beach Avenue and Highway 1.
So how many post offices were in the little communities at that time?
Well,
there were several, weren't there not?
Well, there was one in Rockaway and Sharp Park.
One out on Pedro Point.
And Pedro Point, but that was in later years with Mrs. Bailey and then Juanita Lombardi.
Interesting. Now you mentioned about stores, and Andy, you had a picture of some shops here. You know, Pacifica, I think of Nick's Rockaway Beach restaurant's been here 80 years, but over the years, there's little restaurants have come and gone. But there must have been some really neat fast food places and cafes.
Well, back, these pictures I'm going to show you was before fast food, Horace. This is the east side of, no, this is the west side of Highway 1, and this is the east side of Highway 1. I have a picture that actually was in the Tribune that kind of shows the whole layout of the east side of Sharp Park. It's a good picture. It goes all the way from one end of the block, Janowitz's store, right through the variety store, the pool hall, the Louis Creamery, Casey's appliance store, and goes on down to the gas stations and library, right to where Oceana is now. So this is a good picture.
What year was this?
It says it's 1949, and that's just about it.
You keep everything, don't you?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Horace.
You know, Shelter Cove was an important part of Pacifica history. The Ocean Shore Railroad ran through there to go down to Half Moon Bay. How popular was that area at that time, and what did the teenagers or young adults do in that area?
We did go to the beach. We didn't swim. It was too dangerous, and they didn't have wetsuits like they do now. I think it's great the way they're utilizing the surf now, but it was too cold to go swimming, but we sure liked to suntan. And you could go out to Shelter Point because the road went out there, and there was a little restaurant there.
There was a restaurant, and
Didn't they have fishing boats go out there too?
they had
Fishing boats.
and they also had swings there for the children.
That's right.
Yes,
That's right.
and picnic tables, and we would go out there and play in the sand, and when I was littler, and play on the swings, and my mom and dad would be up in the restaurant and having tea.
Oh gosh! So growing up as a young child or a young adult in Pacifica, although as you say you may not have much to do, you really still had fun.
We did.
Oh, we did.
We had one more social activity I wanted to tell you about. The county, I think, was behind this. I'm not sure. And it started right after the war. They would come over on a Wednesday night in the basement of San Pedro School, which there was a little stage, and they showed movies to the kids. And they went from little tiny kids to teenagers because it was something to do. And 10 cents. And you got a full-length movie like The Three Stooges,
Yes,
or
yeah.
Abbott and Costello, and a cartoon and a cereal like Pauline, you know, The Perils of Pauline.
Right.
My first date was to go to that show. And I want you to know, this is, I was so embarrassed, but my father, I lived about 2.5 blocks away from that school, and my father followed us in the car as we were walking to school, just to make sure I got there. I guess.
You got there okay, right? We're talking about entertainment, though. How excited was the community? 50 years ago, the bowling center opened up. How excited was the community to finally really have something where they could go and enjoy recreation? And you also had the Seaview Theater, too.
We had the Seaview and the bowling alley, but before that, we had like seasons. When I was a youngster, we had kite season in March, and behind my house there was a hill, which is still there, and in the dry season, we'd go down to Louisa's store and get cardboard boxes and slide down the hill. And that was one of the big recreations, sliding down the hill. But we played hopscotch, we jumped rope, we played jacks, and we didn't have video games or anything like that, TV, so you made up your own games.
Yeah, interesting.
We had fantastic swings. Up in Brighton Canyon, behind David Nathan's house, was a swing and a eucalyptus tree that was outstanding. The rope was probably 50 feet long, and it's a wonder we didn't get hurt, but everybody in town would go swing on that swing below the castle.
Now, do either one of you recall Ray Higgins, who I understand was really the person that donated a lot of property back in
Yes.
the early years?
Sure. His mother-in-law was the person that the San Mateo County paid to be our advisor at the Sharp Park Teenagers. She actually had a paid job.
Oh,
and
interesting.
so we did. He was very nice to the teenagers and was very, very helpful in everything that we tried to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
City Hall, we actually obtained City Hall, where City Hall is now, from him, as I understand. So, so his name is very prominent in the history of
Yes.
Pacifica. Yeah. Who were some of the town characters in those early years? Some people that really everybody knew. If you said a person's name, they would know that person. Yeah.
Well, in the early days, there was the bridge, and over in north of Sharp Park, there was a bridge. and underneath the bridge lived this black person, and he was a hobo, and he wore sacks on his feet, and I don't know how he survived, but we had always, when he went over the bridge, you were always looking out the window to see if you could see him.
He was very nice to us and always
Yeah.
talked to us, friendly, but no one could understand how he survived down there.
Yeah, just he was there for years,
Years
and then
and
all of a
years.
sudden he disappeared.
Now, how about the Sam's Castle? You remember that? How
Well,
that came
yes, that was our goal on Halloween, was to get into the castle. And every year a bunch of us would go up there and just beg Mrs. Akins, please, can't we come in? And, no, this is a private home. Oh, foiled again.
Now, when both of you settled here in Pacifica and your families here, did your husbands work outside of the city and they had to go back and forth with transportation too, or did they live and work in the city?
Well, Jack, my husband Jack Regan, worked for the North Coast County Water District, and he was general manager, and then unfortunately had a stroke and had to retire.
Oh, okay.
But no, he always lived and worked in Pacifica also.
Yeah. Is there any place better than Pacifica?
Well, we haven't found it.
I've been here for 75 years, so I don't think
I love the clean air.
Yeah.
And the sound of the ocean and the calming down that it does when you see the ocean. It's just a great feeling.
Do you remember the shopping centers being built and which ones were built first in that order there?
Well, remember, Andy, every time a new store came in, they'd have a dance because we didn't have any halls or anything. So the community would have Alexander's store in
Eureka
Square.
Before-
When that opened, they had a big dance.
Before all the furniture got moved in.
Yeah.
When it was empty,
And then
we'd have a dance.
the Rockaway Beach Progressive Club had dances. I think once a month they had a dance, and Mr. Alonzo was an old-time resident,
Yes.
and he played the drums, and I think there was an accordion and a really swinging band.
There were a lot of dances, Horace, back in those days.
Yeah.
When we finally got to the age, I should say, where we could go out and we could drive or be with kids that drove. We would go to dances on the weekends. We would go down even to Half Moon Bay, to the IDES Hall, and we would go to Miramar, to the hotel. They had dances at Happy Hollow Ranch, which is in what we now call Manor Village. And that whole end of that valley was a ranch. And they had hay rides, they had horses you could rent.
They had dances there.
We touched just a bit about the education, but in the 1960s, both high schools came in. How excited was the community about getting their own high schools here instead of having to go back and forth?
Well, I think that was wonderful because, for one thing, Jefferson was just so crowded. It was just totally, they'd gone from a school of 500 to Lord knows what, and they built Westmore and Terra Nova and Oceana all about the same time. And it's a good thing because this place had just exploded with kids.
Incredible.
On the street I lived on in Valleymar, we had 31 children under the age of 10, and all but 3 of them were boys. So our street, they took paint and drew 10-yard line markers on the street so they could play baseball, football, I mean.
Oh my God.
So it was really something. To get the bowling alley, I was young and married and had little babies, but as soon as they were able, yes, we'd go to the bowling alley with my Cub Scouts, and it was a great thing.
So the bowling alley really has been a fixture in Pacifica
It
for
has
those
been,
50
yeah.
years. One time, as I understand, they tried to build a skating rink there.
Yes.
But that fell apart
That
for
fell
some
apart,
reason.
like so many other things.
Yeah. I also heard that they were thinking about trying to put a swimming pool in that area too, but that never materialized.
Yeah.
So
That I didn't know.
Well, this has been very educational. I have to sort of sneak in a little bit about Andy right now. And Andy's been involved with the sports programs in Pacifica for more than 40 years, her and her husband. And so every year we have what we call the Pacifica Sports Hall of Fame, and Andy and her husband are going to be inducted into the Pacifica Sports Hall of Fame in February. So congratulations on that.
Well, thank you very much.
It's
Thank
very
you.
good. But this has been very interesting. I'm sure that people out in the audience have a lot of information that they can share with us on the history of Pacifica, and we encourage you and invite you to share those with us. Just drop by the studio and perhaps make mention to the people here that you lived here for so many years and you've got these pictures and photographs to show us. We'd love to have them because the Pacifica Historical Society is the one that's putting this all together, and eventually we're going to have a museum here in our community, and we're going to be able to showcase everything here. And so everything that we have as far as pictures, letters, newspaper articles, we're looking for that to happen. So just think about what we can do and go forward with that. Though. But going back to you guys now, what when going back to the early ages and everything, talking about the Pacifica and in the newspaper, did you ever write for the Coastside Chronicle and the Pacifica Tribune?
No,
Andy?
I was just out of high school when I did this, and I started business college and working, and it just never got into my idea to continue that on. That was just during the Korean War, and that was all.
Now, you recently did you guys recently have an anniversary for the high school? Did you celebrate Jefferson? How many years?
Well, we had a big 75,
Yeah.
but that
Yes.
was about
Oh,
7-8 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Coming up on the big 80 then, right?
I think so. I think Jefferson started in 1929, maybe before. I'm not sure exactly.
Well, we've had a great time talking about everything today, and that's about all the time that we're going to have for our guests today. We want to thank you both for taking time out of your busy
You're welcome.
schedule to come in and share this information with us. And certainly if anybody out there on the street runs into you, you'll be able to share your stories with them, because there are a lot of stories in the Pacifica. Now remember, if you want to get involved with the Pacifica Historical Society and our many projects, our address is Box 752, Pacifica. And you can also go to our website. It's www.pacificahistory.org, and the telephone number is 650-359-5462. And we thank you very much for watching the show. Thank you very much.